Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us. I'm so honored and excited to introduce my guest, a multifaceted artist and creative entrepreneur, Genevieve Kim. Genevieve Kim. Genevieve is a storyteller, creating narrative through opera, visual design, and writing. She tells the stories through her camera to connect and shine a light on human courage and vulnerability. Using her finance academic background and expertise as a Deloitte strategy operations and Fortune 500 management consultant, Genevieve is a go-to-market advisor, founder and co-founder of seven-figure businesses and creative director, content production agency, Triangleflash Studio. That's quite mouthful. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Business Insider, Harper's Bazaar, and Adweek, and is featured an artist on Elle.co. And in spring 2021, she'll be debuting her book titled My Big Fuck You's Memoirs of a Creative Entrepreneur. When she's not working, she is traveling on an adventure, either on a horse or scuba diving. Thank you so much, Genevieve, for taking your time to share your journey with us. And I so much appreciate, I can't wait to hear all the stories that you have for us. So first of all, I'm just gonna share one of your works. I think it's really beautiful. I'm sure you have a lot of stories to tell. Let me start sharing my screen with everyone. Alrighty. So can you see the image, Genevieve?
I can, yes.
All right, so walk us through this beautiful image, how this magic came about.
This is actually the image that inspired the project of, I have a project that I've been doing for several years. It's called the ICU project. And it started because I was actually photographing for UN Habitats in Lebanon. And it was for, to survey all the vulnerable neighborhoods throughout the country. And in particular, there was one neighborhood, I wouldn't call it a neighborhood, it was actually a Palestinian refugee camp. And, I remember when going there, I was told not to enter because it was too dangerous. And I was thinking, well, the purpose of this whole assignment, right? This whole purpose was to actually, connect and survey and make photographs of people and living conditions. And when I was told that, I said, you know what, that's okay. If you guys don't want to go in, I'm going in alone. And what ended up happening is not long after, a few minutes later, this woman, she comes up to me and she says, she just starts showing me around. And I discover, this whole community, and she's introducing me to people. And I discover, next thing I know, I'm in her house. And I'm in her house and she's showing me everything that's around. And she's asking me, please help us. She's like saying mafi mai, which in Arabic it means there's no water. And I was just like feeling really helpless. And then, a few minutes later, her daughter comes running out and she's fixing her hijab and, just preparing, getting ready for the camera. And so I decide, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make a photo. And so this photo is actually that woman's daughter and her other two children. And I made this connection. Though I had I barely speak Arabic, like learned just enough. But, I barely could speak and share the sentiment that I was feeling. But what we did have is a connection where we saw each other and we just looked at each other in each other's eyes. And it was this moment of like, now you see us, we exist. We've been completely forgotten. People don't really think about us, and thank you for coming here. And, I realized that this is kind of like a prevailing theme for so many, right? So many marginalized communities. When I was in South Africa, a similar thing happened where we were in Soweto and people were actually coming up and saying, thank you for coming to visit us. The police don't come anymore. The law enforcement agents don't check on us anymore. Like, we've just been completely ignored, and everyone's given up hope on us, right? And so that's when I started this photography project, which is called ICU, where it's, I wanted to really make a practice of seeing others using the intimacy of the photographic lens, right? We all know how sometimes we shy away from, being photographed. And I decided to turn it into more of this practice, and that's kind of been the journey. It's been, this project has been to 16 plus countries, and I'd say 5 continents, yeah. So it's been around quite a bit, and I've been really, really lucky to do this. And one of the reasons, one of the reasons I wanted to share this portrait is that it has been a pretty big anchor in terms of just the way that my philosophy towards photographing, which is really to see others less than, I don't use the word take, shoot, capture, in the traditional language of photography, which is quite predatory. When I don't like to use the word subject so much as more as make a photograph, right? This is this collaborative, as this less of a hierarchical standpoint in how I converse with people as I make portraits. So I don't say the word headshot ever. It's really a portrait that I do, and portraiture is my love in photography, although I do enjoy doing other things. So that's kind of the backstory of this. It has a lot of sentiment and meaning for me.
That's so amazing. I mean, it's just so beautifully told in terms of, you were also demonstrating courage, right? Like, it was like some like forbidden site. You weren't allowed to go. People were hesitant to even go. Even people who are actually locals were hesitant to go. And you actually brought really light into their community and showing, like, giving them visibility, right? And voice, like through, because they were so hidden, they were not recognized, and you actually brought them to light and to the entire world. So really, really appreciate you taking that courage to take that action and be able to share these beautiful images to the world. So that's really great. Yeah, just no. So tell us about your journey as an artist, and how did it all begin, and how did you thrive as an artist and an entrepreneur?
It's a really interesting one. I was very artistic from a little, from a kid's point, since I was a kid, and I was a singer for for the first part of my life. I was actually trained as an opera singer. I took piano since I was like 5 years old, and I used to love writing. I would write stories. I had a poem that was published when I was like third grade. I don't even think I submitted it. I think my teacher submitted it for me. And then my mom's like, oh, you're here, like your poem, we're going to buy a few copies of it. I was like, okay. Honestly, I think it was on Stars. Anyways, so I loved writing and loved doing that. And to be honest, when I was little, I thought I was going to be either a Broadway singer or a fashion designer. So, but coming from the household that I came from, which was very conservative and very, I would say stereotypical immigrant mindset, which was, you don't do art. That's like a hobby. And so I struggled with that a lot. I think that kind of dialogue was in my head for a very long time, which was, you don't do that unless you're exceptionally, like you're a rare bird, or like you're just like something, a true diamond in the rough. And so I struggled a lot internally with this idea of really, really making it as an artist. So when I was after graduating from university, I continued to pursue music, and life kind of happened where I sort of lost my voice. And I lost it through, I was married and divorced by the time I was 24, and was just really reconciling a lot of things in that sort of, it was an abusive relationship, and trying to refine myself. And in that pathway of refining myself, it's kind of funny because I was like, okay, so I bombed my final audition. It was for San Diego Opera. And I just remember I ran out of stage. And I ran off stage because basically they cut me off like in the middle of my song. It was just like, and I just remember not even being able to finish it. Man. And it just made me realize like, okay, shoot, I just can't keep doing this. So, about a year later, as I was kind of doing my own inadvertent eat, pray, love sort of thing. And I was about to go to India, and my yoga teacher, she was like, hey, I want you to do this. I want you to help me with, starting this yoga center. And I was like, who are you talking to? I'm like I just study music and literature. I don't know what I had no idea. And so she's like, no, I want you to do it with me. And so I helped open this yoga center, and we had 3 studios. We were operating 180 classes a week, and we're doing a lot of programs and things. And this was all when I was 25 years old, and I was managing a staff of like 30. And I discovered, wow, there's something that I'm passionate about that's outside of music and creativity. And lo and behold, I was able to then channel a lot of that creativity that I had into business. And that led to, okay, well, I want to know what the big boys are doing in business. Like, it was still an anathema to me. And so I went back and got my MBA in finance. So after I left Duke, I got into management consulting, and I became a management consultant for digital marketing strategy. And it was rough. Honestly, it really wasn't my working style. Granted, I learned a ton. I'd have no regrets. I would never trade it in a million years, because I actually I gained so much from working there, but it just wasn't me. And I felt the call as I was spiraling into deeper and deeper depression, which I had been dealing with for, over a decade. And as I was spiraling further and further into depression, I got to the point where I was suicidally depressed, and I knew something had to change. And so I put in my 2 weeks notice, and I said, okay, though I know I've never sold a print before, and though I know I don't know if I can do this, but I know that I have to follow my heart, which is telling me that photography, is something that's just calling me. And so I put my 2 weeks notice, and I didn't look back. And now it's been 5+ years since I did that. And it's been an incredible, remarkable journey. It has been one really, really challenging one, but also probably one of the most rewarding. And I knew internally for me that I wanted to somehow dispel this myth of the starving artist. And I also wanted to dispel this myth of the lone artist. So, in that journey where initially I may have started out with the scarcity mindset and thinking, well, can I charge for my work? Is my work even good? Like all the things that we go through as artists, right? And lo and behold, what really shifted for me was, instead of me thinking about, okay, I need to earn money and I need to make it and put all this pressure on like making money out of the art, I went to Lebanon. This was during my time of, when I traveled for a year before, I traveled a year after I left Deloitte. And during that time, I was, really discovering and practicing and playing, and I didn't really put too much pressure on myself. And it's when that project for UN Habitats, that experience came out, and the opportunity arose, and I took it. And from that was purely out of curiosity and a desire to explore and, my human interest. And from that came the ICU project. And with the ICU project, I had no intention of monetizing it, to be honest. I had no, it was really like in something in my heart where I said, I want to do this. I want to try this. I want to set a project goal and just practice. And that was my whole mindset. I want to get better. Even when I was like suicidally depressed, it's very interesting that the one thing that did get me out of bed was photography. Like I would just go every single morning. I would wake up and I would walk the streets walk every single morning in New York. And pretty much like around 7:30 before like the hustle and bustle began. And I would photograph in the streets. And that same practice, right? That lightness, like not having necessarily any rigidity or expectations of my art to do things, to make money for me, translated into, I then had brands reaching out to me. They were like, we want you to do this for us. So pretty much within my first year, I got a commission to do 250 portraits. I mean, it was a 5-figure contract. To be honest, it was like $26,000, which I like really pat myself on the back for that because I had never sold a print before. I had never sold really. Maybe I had done one wedding photography thing for a friend. And to be honest, I did it more as a favor. Because, I don't have that eye for wedding photography. It's just, it's a total different sort of skill set. And so it was just something quite miraculous. And then I had another subsequent client who was like, I just remember him coming over to my house. I was having a dinner gathering and he saw my portraits on the wall and he was like, we need to do that for our startup. And he was like, yeah, we have like 50 agents around the world. Will you do it? And I was like, okay. And so that became the next project. And that was another 5-figure project. And then I had another one, right? So what was really cool and unique about this, I even had, down in Soho, Melissa Gallery. It's like they're a Brazilian shoe brand. They have a huge store on Broadway. And they were like, we want you to do it here. And I was like, what? Like, what is this collaboration? Yeah. We want you to do it. And we're going to display like your portraits on our LCD, screen. And that's facing Broadway. I was like, come again? And I don't want to romanticize any of this. There were periods between where it was like, oh my God, am I going to make rent? I don't know. And I was definitely very embarrassed considering that I had a degree in finance, right? I'm like, I have a degree in finance and yet like, I'm like struggling here. But over time, gradually, I developed a community of people who really supported me and believed in my work. And then I grew into my own craft and realizing, what I enjoyed most about the work that I'm doing and the, kind of sort of my niche. I did a lot of different trial and error, did tons of trial and error in some areas. But overall, I knew I'm not a product photographer. I'm not a commercial photographer. I'd say I'm a blend of documentary and I like to call myself a cultural photographer. I really like to photograph culture, and oftentimes culture is expressed through landscape and humanscape. So yeah, it's evolved. Going to this thing, and then I'll, I think I'm rambling a little bit, but the entrepreneurship part, where it meets entrepreneurship is I realized that what it takes in business is the very similar thing that's required in being an artist. And it's actually required in being successful in any single endeavor. And it's just this one principle, which is just show up. Just show up. That's it. But it's really difficult, right? I mean, I used to have this thing where I was like, what is this Instagram thing? Like I was like so anti-Instagram because I was like, nobody puts baby in a box. Like this 1x1 shit. I was like, like, no, you don't put me in a 1x1. And just like these different platforms. And so, but I started to appear on Elo.co and I was very consistent there. And I also appreciated that they were anti-algorithm. They were more time-based. But then I started to get more consistent on Instagram, just slightly, like posting twice a week, if that. And that consistency led to more things. And I realized whatever those excuses and those blocks that I previously had about not showing up, they were really hindering my own success. And I think that's the most difficult part about being an artist, which is showing up and then being okay with, you know, whatever sort of feedback. And the feedback's really all in our head, right? So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
I love that. I mean, thank you so much for like being really like sharing all the journeys. I know it's in reality, right? Everyone talks about the success, the outside, like the tip of the iceberg, but no one really talks about what goes really behind the scenes in terms of the challenges and all the struggles to get to where you are today. I mean, yeah, like the stigma around like the starving artist, right? Like, you know, usually our culture or our parents, you know, hinder us from like pursuing the art because it's not sustainable. But somehow you found a way, like all through your journeys and experience, and you were able to align them, right? Align all your skills and your purpose. Yeah, so like, can you tell us a little bit about that, how everything came to an alignment and how are you staying focused, like while managing all these multiple seven-figure businesses and able to create?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. So if I had to say, if I did a Venn diagram and I was thinking about like how there's like this dichotomy between, you know, they say like with art and then, you know, then you have like the left brain versus the right brain. And for me, my mind has always been very much both. And I think where the convergence was able to happen is really in the art of storytelling and communications, which is critical for any sort of endeavor, right? It really doesn't matter. And so for me, I found that juncture, and I happen to like storytelling through two particular mediums, which one is photography and the other is writing, right? Other people may like to do it through song, and I discovered that wasn't necessarily like how I was going to do it through music. But I did know photography and writing was a part of that. And then slowly, right, I realized that I could bring that forth into, you know, into spaces that could use an elevated sort of approach to, or a less superficial approach to their brands, right? And I don't want to put down anything, but I think there's a level of depth when, you know, you take quality art, right, or quality perspective, and you apply that and you bring it to something that might be seen to a more to a broader audience. And so that's what I ended up doing, which therefore then translated into starting a media production company where it was not just me anymore. It included, you know, other talent. And my heart has always gone back to, I feel like it's kind of a full circle thing where, you know, oftentimes I would hire people to work with me they had raw talent. Maybe they were slightly, you know, nascent or, you know, sort of just emerging into the kind of business arena. But I knew that I could not only uplift them through, you know, giving them an opportunity to work on a project that could utilize their talent, and then also give them a little bit of the mentorship for, you know, in business, right? And after that, you know, the next kind of phase of that evolved after doing media production. I did feel a little bit of the pinch, to be honest, of putting the pressure of things with client demands, and in terms of like the autonomy with which I would want to express and do art. And it's a whole topic for another conversation. I never really ever compromised on what my vision was. And, I figured that if a client hired me, they understood my portfolio and understood my style, and that I would recommend to any artist, don't ever change your style. I mean, there's a niche for you, and there's a creative expression. There are people who are going to rally around that. But I did find that there was sometimes friction, and I no longer wanted to focus on that, sort of navigating that friction. And COVID then happened. So I remember, what was it, March 13th? It was like Friday the 13th. It's hilarious in New York, right? It was like, everything's shutting down. Like, I remember the night before I went to my friend's house for dinner, and it was dead quiet. I was biking through the streets and I was like, is this Vanilla Sky? Is this the apocalypse scene? Like, and it was so dead. And my client had just told me, we're closing our doors down. And it was it was at the time the only client that I had left. And I was like, thank God. And I felt like it was a sign. And that's when that shift where I went back into more of like using my creative strategy to really help influence brands and how they shape and tell their stories and narrate that. And I took all those components from being able to tell a really good story in a pitch that I learned in management consulting. Yes. And then also, right, to be able to express eloquently. I find that the photo is such an eloquent piece of art, it's like more succinct than a haiku, right? Because it's literally only one syllable, right? A haiku is like 575, but a photo is like, and so that I guess you could call it that what is this, concision, that to be that succinct, and learning that really helped me parlay that into messages and stories. And that's when I really focused on go-to-market strategy for brands. And I continue still today, which is a thing that's really important to me, is to continue to share with other creative entrepreneurs. These are some of the skills that you need to have. And I love doing that, and also empowering artists and reminding them to mind your own business. You've heard me say this, but I'm like, really, mind your own business. I mean this from like so much, because if you care where your art's going, if you care who's buying it, you care who's going to see it, you care how people are going to use it, you're going to pay attention. You're going to pay attention to it. And it's not like, and one of the things is, and I've been in this position too, I just want to be the artist. Like, I don't deal with that stuff, which is such a bunch of bullshit. Because if you really cared about where your work is, you're not going to let it just be bought by anybody, right? If your work is that important to you, you're going to care about how it is curated, right? From where it's published, right? How it's, how much people are buying it for, what is it worth, right? Do you respect the value of your art that you produce? Like, it does require business acumen. And so when I see artists digging their head under the sand and saying that, I'm like, no. This is how you take full accountability and full oversight of your work. And that's, instead of just having like a broker, right? Maybe, and I'm not like, by no means am I pushing this on the rug, but it's like sometimes, as artists, we gotta be our own best advocate, and sticking our head in the sand and not knowing the business about it is not okay. It's irresponsible, especially with the gift and talent that we've been given. So I then launched about 6 months ago a group. It's called A Creative Mastermind. And actually, Nina, you've met some of the women there. A Creative Mastermind, it's a group that is a network of women that focuses on, we focus on women, creative entrepreneurship, which we have like, you know, some of our members, like one of them is an Academy Award-winning documentary filmmaker, right? And we also then have the founder of, you know, Acronym, where she's basically leading Joe Biden's campaign, right? So in these pockets where there's really been no roadmap for one, there's no roadmap to be a successful creative, right? You got tons of incubators lined up for tech, but you got none for, right, creatives. And yeah, sure, you got a residency here and there, but the, you know, like the infrastructure is not there for creatives in the arts. Number two is women, right? Like let's just be clear, you know, $80 trillion is spent on, $80 trillion is the amount that is, that startups are receiving funds. I'm saying that very inarticulately, but basically $80 trillion is in circulation for funding. Then of the 80 trillion, only 1% were given to women. I think we can do better than that. We can do better than that. We can do maybe, let's go to 2% at least. Like, I mean, I just want to raise the bar a little bit here. And I think that given that with, you know, being an entrepreneur on top of that, right, there is really no roadmap. And so I didn't want anybody to be in the same situation that I was in when I first started out, which was lonely AF. And it was very trying. And I didn't, you know, it was only until I met a really cool group and a community, I started to form like a really strong, tight-knit community of people who were like other artists, and we were kind of like-minded, and they didn't have this scarcity competition mindset, but really more collaborative, and we'd do projects together and things. And that's when I sort of discovered like, wow, like that's the key. That is the key to showing up. The key to showing up is that support. We can't do it alone. We're not supposed to do it alone. We don't create in a vacuum. And so when I met my co-founder, her name is Samantha Katz, and you know, she's a brilliant art director and creative director. She's actually worked on some incredible projects, curating for hotels and like Art Basel, and you know, she's even done stuff with Google Earth. Like it's crazy. So she and I had this, I would say we had a kinship, right? Like this camaraderie. And the camaraderie was really around the two of us being, you know, we understood what it was to be artists, like having floated in our own world. And we were like, you know, we just don't want that to be the same experience that other artists are having. And as a result of that, we started a creative mastermind. And that was to really bring together women who were on a creative path and who weren't in the safety nets of a 9-to-5, which is a myth because 9-to-5s really aren't safe, but you know, the comfort zone of it. And those who were really leaping outside of that, and to give a support network. And that's been, you know, one of probably my most, you know, I love that project. We just finished our second season last night, which is amazing. And we're starting our third season. By the way, Nina, plug, I think you should get on it. You know, and it's such a powerful group of creative, badass women. And that's what's been really, I think, the full circle of it all, which is the business, the creative, and then me just not wanting anyone to go through this torment alone, and to thrive, to really thrive. So I actually am starting, it's just about a month ago, I decided that I was going to start a fund. And the fund is primarily focused on funding women who are in non-tech. And so that leaves a lot of room because, you know, not every woman wants to go into STEM, right? And then that's totally legit. It's okay if they don't want to do science, technology, engineering, or math. But where's the funding for that, right? And so this fund will be for women-founded businesses that are focused on non-tech and that have a very, strong priority for ESG. And so that's like the next chapter in my journey, where I feel like, it's the next layer for where things are going as in terms of like the creativity, bringing that, and then also helping others to continue to do that.
Wow, that's amazing. Like I said, like where do I begin? Like there's so much things that you have covered in one question. That's really amazing. First of all, yes, I think that's one key thing that's missing in the art world is that collaborative support for women. And again, there's always a huge current issue historically, that women artists are not being represented in the history, right? It's all about the white dudes. No offense, right? But it's all about like the guys who are making the big headlines, and that's what been talked about over several decades. But now we're sort of saying, starting to discover like the great women artists out there. So I mean, it's a start. I mean, we're not there yet, but at least we're having the conversation. It's out there, and you're actually, and along with your initiative, you're supporting women creatives, because like, yes, definitely a lot of funding has gone to like tech and startups and all that, but in the arts, it's like there's no like funding for arts. It's always the first thing that gets cut in the government funding, right? All the museums are struggling, and that's always been the case, and all the grants for artists are being cut. So it's really, yeah, I would love to get on that. We'll talk about it offline, but how we could get involved, and also the funding too. It's such an important initiative, and I'm glad you were actually starting out that. Aside from a new initiative, let's talk about your upcoming book. I love to hear more about what that's all about, and maybe we could get a first glimpse of what that's all about. When is it coming out? So if you could share that, that'll be awesome.
Yes, well, it's essentially kind of, you guys are getting like a little bit of a sneak preview. It's a lot about the last 5 years of this journey, right? And some things historically that have driven me to become a creative entrepreneur, and the marriage between those two, and how, I don't just mean that, I'm creative in business, but that really I am both a creative human being and I'm an entrepreneur, although being an entrepreneur requires a lot of creativity, but you get what I mean. One really fascinating thing to just note, I've noticed historically that pretty much all the clients that I've ever met, and this includes my clients who are, also more so I guess you could call them more institutional clients, where they're, I'm helping them more with strategy than I am with art, is they found me because of art. They found me, for example, one of, I have a client, I have a couple of clients who are in private equity, and they found me because of my work in art, not because they didn't necessarily know that I was a go-to-market strategist, yet it was a precursor, right? Same thing with my friend, as I mentioned to you, he was at my house. Was throwing a dinner party, and my photos, portraits happened to be hanging up, like, it was like my work studio. And he's like, what is this, right? And there I am. I'm also able to execute on, content strategy and think about things from more of a CMO perspective, right? So it's been, I want to say how powerful art can be to start a conversation. Also how powerful art has taught me how to live and be. So when I first started, my business, I oftentimes reflected back on sort of the discipline and the approach in which I, sort of mastered, whether it was singing or how I would master any other skill. And it was through practice, observation, and constant, curiosity. And then, actually, having feedback. So when I was a singer, we would have repertoire class where we would sing a few pieces and we would get feedback like in front of everybody. And, initially you're like, what the hell? Like, it's just like, what? People just pick on you. And it's like, no, thank you. Like, how can I improve? And I think that same sort of muscle for us to be able to approach, whether it's, in our artistic endeavors, our creative endeavors, or, in our more, business or professional endeavors is equally important, and also in our relationships in life. And so I like to say that, photography has been probably one of my greatest teachers. It's not only is photography one of my greatest teachers, it's been one of my greatest companions in life. I name all of my cameras, by the way. They all have names, and my friends know them. They're like, hey, is Felix coming out today or is Grecia? It's like, it's really cute. Like, they know that, because for me, they're not just, they're not tools. They're not inanimate objects, right? They're more than that. It's kind of like fire. Yeah, it is a technology. Fire is technology, yet it's a force. And so for me, I've found that in the relationship with photography, it's taught me a lot about, courage. It's taught me, right, the courage to go to these unknown places. It's taught me also the ability. Sometimes I hate looking at my images, like the images I just made. I'm like, oh, like, I don't even want to go into the editing, because I'm like, that self-criticism. But to practice the non-self-criticism and just to be like objective, and then just ship. You got to ship to the client. You
have to deliver.
You got to deliver, and it's the same thing in business. At some point, you can think that, it's like, oh, what's the perfect logo or perfect tagline? Or like, did I price this right? And it's just like, at some point, you just got to ship and you got to get the feedback. And I would say art has been more didactic for me, is in teaching me about life than any other sort of medium. Yes, I mean, and I say that, I do meditate, I practice yoga, there's many different modalities of, self examination. But I found that the practices within the creative exercises have really helped me deepen my self-examination further, which therefore improves my overall quality of life. So that's what my big fuck yous is. It's basically big fuck yous, because, we have so many limiting beliefs, and I'm just like unshedding. I'm like, I'm unlayering those, like, lots of limiting beliefs. I'm saying, fuck you, limiting belief. Biggest one, that, oh, you can't make money being an artist. Second one is like, oh, it's like, I'll never be good enough. No, that's not true. So many other limiting beliefs that I had, like, I'm not good enough, or, why should I even bother? Or, the pressure, like the expectations. And probably one of the biggest things that I've learned in this book thematically is all of the gifts that emerged when I just decided to explore, be curious, and not put any sort of like expectation on how I performed. Because, kids in a sandbox, they don't go like, I need to build like a 40-foot sandcastle and it needs to be this. I need to do it in 40 minutes or less. It's not. Like, the magic happens when we just don't have that. And I think it's a balance, right, between that and setting our boundaries. Like, when we don't want kids stealing our tools from our sandbox per se, or like messing it up either, to have the boundaries with our clients and say, no, I'm not going to do that for you for $0, or no, I'm not going to do that 10th revision for you, or no, like, this is what it is. This is my work. You either take it or you don't. And to have that self-value, which I didn't. So that's basically what my big fuck yous is all about. Saying no more to those silly stories I used to tell myself.
Amazing, amazing. I agree with you 1000% on that. I could definitely relate to all of the things that you've been saying. I think, oftentimes you forget creativity and entrepreneurship goes hand in hand. It's not a separate entity, a lot of people think. And a lot of people say, oh, creative really is for artists. It only is a skill set that artists have the gift for. It's not, right? As entrepreneur, that's not true. And also the power of art, right? Distilling that certain messaging is pretty powerful, and it's not easy to do, distilling like complex idea into one image, especially photography. They said a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? It takes a lot of courage to do that. Sometimes it's not easy to present certain ideas that's some radical or challenging, but artists have that courage. Success, at least, like aside from being like starving artist mindset, I mean, it's just that thing. There's no such thing as perfection either, because I know starving artist mindset has that. It's perfectionism. I'll get this out when it's ready. It'll never be ready, right? and I think that's one thing that artists have to break through in terms of getting their work out there and start some, and getting feedback is also crucial. It's not personal, right? That's something some people take it to the heart if it's bad, but it's actually a good feedback for you to grow. So I think we need to sort of acknowledge that, right? That aspect of the growth, self growth, and of course, like throwing out the limiting beliefs you just mentioned. I think that's we go through, whether it's artists or entrepreneur, we go through that every single day. It's just navigating through those waters. So yeah, I really, no, this is a quite treat that we get to actually hear your book, and I can't wait. When is it coming out?
I mean, it was supposed to come out this already, like in the spring. And, it's, I'm putting, yeah, you know what? It is going to probably come out this summer. And I'm just going to say this. I realize, the expectation and that pressure, right? Is I'm consistent in showing up, right? And, but I can't control anything else other than that. Right. And so, is it for lack of, because I'm trying to be perfect about it? No, I mean, I'm writing shit like a lot of time. Some chapters I'm like, yes. And some chapters I'm like, okay, that was whatever, but I showed up today. That's fine. And so, and sometimes, and I've just kind of been like, okay, 500 words. If I can just get 500 words today, that's okay. And so the process, I'm allowing also, I think there's this wiggle room, right, with the process, is that sometimes there's this mentality with, within, I think, our very, very, modern society, which is the hustle. And I hate the hustle. To me, it's like the antithesis of trusting that, right? Trusting. And this is maybe definitely a very artsy and woo-woo thing to say, but the creative process and the spirit that comes through with the creative process. Like there are times so often, and I'm sure you can relate to this, and many of our listeners can relate to it, is when the eureka happens, not because you planned it, but by pure coincidence or accident. But it's not just accident or coincidence. It's because after, with Edison, right? After just continuously showing up, the solution comes, right? But it's not like, it's like do or die, 30 cups of coffee, got to snort some, stuff into stay up and do that. Like, I just remember that kind of in like the corporate culture too. It's like burn, 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 burn. The more hours you work, it's like, no, let's just be consistent and let's just, see what happens. And then trust that it'll come. And that's something I think that's been an evolution in my practice. To be honest, I wasn't always like that. In fact, I'm still very much like learning to trust, really trust myself that things will flow and things will come. And then also trusting, also that there are other things outside of my control that, universe or what have you may have a better plan than I could have ever thought of. And so I don't just sit in my chair and wait. I still show up, but I'm not going to put on this like, well, because I didn't accomplish XYZ, then it means that my work didn't matter, right? Or it doesn't count. It counts. It's the clocking in and out. Just show up, do the best you can at the day. Like, I'm just gonna show up as best I can. Some days it's like, oh man, disaster. Like, and some days it's like, okay, it's great. And then the medium of the averages is great. That's the work. So I'm excited. Yeah, hey, summer, I'm hoping.
Totally.
Like, I'm like at 40,000 words, and my goal was to do 60,000 words. So I'm like
no pressure.
Okay. But talking about this with you, and I've been talking about it on, sharing it in other interviews. It's great because it keeps my momentum and excitement for it. So thank you for asking.
Of course. I mean, it's no pressure. I mean, it's just like, it is what it is, right? It's like, we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves. It has to be this perfect, and in order to get there, it has to be certain ways. And actually it isn't. Like, it's part of the journey. And I think we put too much pressure on ourselves in terms of what other people think, what success look for others, and look for, for ourselves. And I definitely I agree with that. Like, that's part of the journey of entrepreneurs or even artists, is that not just like try to meet the expectations of what others, but it's also about, it's just about, sorry, I'm just losing track of thought. Like, there's so many things that you mentioned that was right on. Is that it's just that it takes patience too, and trust. I think that you brought out a really good point, trust. And sometimes we lose that patience because if you don't see that result, right? Like, we are so impatient with ourselves, we think it's a failure, but in reality, it's really not. But it shows up as a failure because I didn't do this, so that means I'm a failure. But I think people forget is that if you don't try, that's 100% failure. Like, if you just quit, that's like 100% failure. But even trying, even just one thing, like tiny steps, that's already a step towards that success. I think that's a lot of people tend to forget, and trust is a big part of that. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Speaking of success, what's your definition of success, and what does it look like for you?
Success. I know for me, what I know, I feel like I will have hit a milestone in success. To me, I will have hit a milestone of success when this, and it's a very measurable, is when this fund is up and it's actually serving people. Which, people are like, oh, it's not what you do, right? I think it's so if I had to think about that if that's the micro, I think it's the impact for me. And I know that I would consider myself a success right now because of the impact. And I feel like a success, first off, because I'm living in integrity with, there we go, here it's coming out. I'm living with integrity and doing things the only way that I know how to do them, which is my way, and not trying to be anybody else or do things a certain particular way that, is out of integrity with who I am. Because there's some crazy statistic, like the sperm that hit my mom's egg, like it's like crazy probability, right? Like, just, it's insane, right? I think it's, like, just, what is it? Like, the probability of this life happening and the uniqueness, right? Because there's no single one of us that's the same. There must be a reason I'm different from Nina. There must be a reason I'm different from all of you out there. And so I want to honor that. And if we're all little pieces of a puzzle, right, that make up a larger mosaic, if I don't show up as me, then there's going to be a missing piece. And so, yeah, I don't think I've ever articulated that or thought about that before, but thank you for asking that.
Oh my God, it's just a beautiful, like you put it really beautifully. That's so true. Everyone is so unique. It's astounding, like to know the probability of, right? And, you know, having like a child, right? Like, I mean, I went through that. It was just incredible, right? Like, just like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, you know, all the odds, beating all the odds, right? It's all about beating the odds, but and definitely we're here for a reason. Everyone on this planet is here for a reason, and sometimes it takes time for us to discover what that is. It's a journey, right? And some people find it early on and some people find it later. It doesn't really matter as long as you find it and actually taking actions toward that. So really thank you so much for sharing all your journey with us. Such an inspirational stories, and I mean all these amazing advice for artists and creatives. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Do you have any other remarks that you want to share before we close?
I think touching on you kind of inspired something, Nina, at that very end, which is I don't think I know what I'm doing still. And I don't think any of us ever do. And I think that's the beauty when we actually start to connect with others. We discover that we really all don't know what the hell we're doing here, other than the fact that we're all trying to figure it out. So instead of isolating ourselves and putting ourselves in like a little box and thinking like everyone else has things figured out or doing this comparison game, none of us have it figured out. And that's just the whole discovery process. It's all one discovery process. So any sort of pressure to like have it figured out by a certain date or age or certain, you know, number of years after doing something or after a job or whatever it is, I mean, there's more to discover. So let's just keep on discovering together and be one another's best support and advocate and share, like really to share with each other what we're learning and to be very, very open about it because we all need the help. So.
Yeah. And speaking of collaboration, how can people stay connected with you and follow and find out like when your book actually comes out?
Yes, I am on Instagram. It is Triangleflash. Very simple because my name is very difficult to spell. Genevieve is hard. So it's triangle and flash as in a camera. So Triangleflash on Instagram. That's probably like the best way to find me. And my website's going under reconstruction, but it is my name, GenevieveKim.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. I actually like that platform. I'm kind of getting new and used to it. So do that. And if you're interested in a creative mastermind, the website is acreativemastermind.com. And we welcome all women, creative, entrepreneur badasses.
Nice, lovely. Well, thank you so much, Genevieve, for your time and sharing your wisdom with us. I think we're all inspired by your journey and continue to follow your journey on these platforms. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in and joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.